In this video, I want to take a look at the transfer portal and how it impacts women's college basketball. It's recently come back into the news as during one of Geno Auriemma's post-game press conferences, he came out about how the transfer portal is often unfair to smaller programs and the coaches that invest so much time in those players. And then others have come out against Geno Auriemma saying, "You're a hypocrite and you've totally misread the situation." So I will touch on this a bit, as well as taking a look overall. Is the transfer portal good or bad, or is it a bit mixed? So before we start, if you like the content, then please consider subscribing to the channel. All right, let's get into this. So just to give you context, after the UConn beat St. John's, Geno was in the post-game press conference and at one point was talking about how more difficult it is to rebuild teams basically every year, where it's no longer sort of a 4-year cycle with players. A reporter asked him to expand on this, and he gave a long, thoughtful answer, which was basically saying that he got into the coaching game and he was fortunate because normally if kids come to UConn, they stay there because the opportunities are good. But he was bemoaning the fact for lesser programs, I guess you would say, like St. John's, where the potential you coach up a kid, an unheralded recruit comes in and does super well, and then just a year later they might be off to go grab NIL riches from a more stronger program or one that offers better NIL opportunities. The money quote was, "How do you coach in an environment where players feel like they owe you nothing and you owe them everything?" And well, if you're an Auriemma supporter, you're saying, yep, Geno's telling it like it is. If you're a hater or not an Auriemma fan, then you would say, oh, it's a little bit rich, you saying college athletes about how they're looking for a better deal, seeing that you're getting around $2 million a year for coaching. So it's only fair for the kids to look out for the best deal for themselves. But then where he really came unstuck was he mentioned a player from Seton Hall who was developed there, and then she up and left the program sort of saying, high and dry to go take a better opportunity someplace else.
You got a player that's really, 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 really good that you coached the hell out of, and you just made them like who they are, like happened to Seton Hall last year. And that kid goes, yeah, well, I think I can make more money somewhere else. Okay? Well, you wouldn't have been this good if it wasn't for your coaching staff that you have right now. So again, it becomes just a transaction. And I don't think any coach that got into it that's around anywhere around my age completely buys into all that.
It seems like he was alluding to Seton Hall point guard Lauren Parker Lane, who transferred from Seton Hall to Mississippi State, which in hindsight for Geno, it was a really poor example because she'd done 4 years. She was a graduate transfer. So Parker Lane clapped back a little bit, saying, "To say I left my 4-year university for money is reckless." As well, the Mississippi State strength coach as well went Will Smith, saying, "Keep my PG's name out of your mouth," which I did find amusing. But overall, a very poor example, as, recently UConn, just as a couple of years ago, they had Lou Lopez Seneschal, who was a grad transfer. I've never heard Geno say he has any issue with grad transfer. I understand the larger point that he's making, though. But I was sort of surprised that he didn't mention Anissa Morrow or suggest DePaul had a player do this, which would be more relevant to the point he's making. But I still feel like even with Anissa Morrow, she didn't owe DePaul anything. She played hard her 2 years. That's the gig. Coaches leave all the time and don't even think twice about it. So to clutch at our pearls and go, oh my God, how can they not show this program loyalty, I think is a little bit over the top. Now, there are cases when the transfer goes really, really well. Let's take Lauren Betts, for instance. That was the transfer case that worked out for both parties, if you like. Betts was obviously frustrated playing behind Brink and getting limited minutes, and it just wasn't a fit for her. So she transfers to UCLA, which is a perfect fit. Both schools benefit. So UCLA, that's the final piece they need to make them a super competitive Final Four challenging, championship challenging team. But as well, it's like those trades where both team wins. Stanford benefited as well, as it opened up space and allowed Kiki Arefin to get playing time, who in a lot of ways is a better fit for Brink than Lauren Betts was. So it's really a win-win situation for this, as she probably would have had still limited minutes on the bench. And she says one of the reasons that Kiki says one of the reasons she's excelling this year is just she doesn't have to look over her shoulder in fear of, the next mistake I make, I'm going to be sitting on the bench. Another player that did well through the portal was Sanaya Rivers, who left South Carolina after her freshman year. She said she was grateful for winning the championship but wanted more playing time. She did the math of who was there and who was coming in and quickly worked out, it wasn't the place for her, and she seems to be flourishing at NC State. So that's a positive. Now, it doesn't always go well. The case I would point to would actually be UConn and South Carolina once again. The players I'm talking about are Sailor Poffenbarger and Chloe Kitts. It's interesting, as if you look at their stories, they're very similar, as they both went to their respective schools mid-year, started freshman mid-year. Now, Poffenbarger was 22 and Kitts was 2023 when they started, but they were both miserable that freshman year, second semester freshman year. I think this was more popular a couple of years ago because the players had the extra COVID year, and it seemed like a way to get to school faster before the rest of your, recruiting class, to get used to the school, and then you could really hit the ground running the following year. The only problem is both of these players were miserable doing this, is you don't really know anybody. You're starting school in your second semester. You're not playing, and it really does sound quite miserable. And then the following year, like Sailor Poffenbarger was down on the depth chart. I think she had a bit of a shin injury and then wasn't happy and basically decided to transfer. So she had to sit out the rest of that season, the 2021-22 season. And then did articles about how much happier she was at Arkansas, where she was transferring to, because she could be herself and paint her nails, which was forbidden at UConn. And yeah, she was living, sort of much happier and could be herself, and just the environment overall was better for her. Where Chloe Kitts, on the other hand, just stayed and worked on her game over summer with Raven Johnson, and then went to the under-19 Team USA and fought for a position at South Carolina. And then when she came back, she didn't start immediately, the first exhibition game. Sanaya Fagan was the starter, but the next game in Paris, she did get the starting job, and it's just been all good since then for her. And then I'm just wondering, I just watched today the Arkansas versus LSU game, and Arkansas got beat up pretty good by about 20, and at one point they couldn't score at the start of the game. And I'm just like, I wonder if Sailor has regret about leaving UConn and not just sticking out a little bit longer, because her game would have been perfect for UConn as well. With Descharme not playing, she would have had the perfect spot and would have been the rebounder they needed, and would be getting a lot of points with a top program and really have a high profile. And I guess from a distance, that's sort of the downside of the portal, is it just makes it so easy to say, no, don't like this, gonna move on, didn't work out, we'll start anew. And is that always the best choice, where being forced to sit out that year sort of makes you reevaluate and say, do I really need to change or not? So, and to be honest, only Sailor would know. I mean, it might have been mental health issues or whatever. Great. It was your choice to make. I'm not saying that. And I guess this is YouTube. I'm supposed to say the portal's the worst thing ever, the best thing ever. I'm really sitting on the fence. I can see the good in it, like Lauren Betts, and sort of how everybody wins. But at the same time, I wonder if it has a downside where it just makes it a little bit too easy to change schools. And if you're being challenged, it's just easy to say, no, I'll go here where life, I'll go, the grass will be greener on that side, and oftentimes it's not. Anyway, your thoughts, comments. Thanks a lot for watching. Good night.